I guess just before I get started on my presentation on the observations on the gut content of oriental weatherloach, I just want to highlight that these are just observations. We haven't done any further data analysis at this time, but we're hoping to work through that over the coming months. So I thought I'd just start off with a bit of background on what the oriental weatherloach is. I didn't want to assume that everyone knew. So it's a non-native fish species, and as you can see, it's small, elongated and cylindrical. And it may reach up to a size of 250 mils, but it's generally found less than 190 mils. It has 5 pairs of barbels that surround its small downturned mouth, and it lays between 4,000 and 8,000 eggs on each spawning occasion, and it can spawn multiple times in a season. It can live up to 7 years in the wild and has been recorded living for more than 13 years in captivity. So I guess the species has a range of traits that enable it to tolerate a range of environmental conditions. So its body is covered in mucus, which makes it very difficult to handle, but may also assist the fish in living out of water when it finds itself in those sorts of situations. The species can air breathe, so again, this assists the species in living out of water and also tolerating quite low dissolved oxygen conditions when it again finds itself in those situations. And it can tolerate a wide range of temperatures, so it's been recorded being able to tolerate temperatures as low as minus 1.76 degrees, including full enclosure in ice, up to 42 degrees. So I guess all of these traits assist it in its survival, and it's perhaps therefore no surprise that it's a very successful invader in habitats to which it's been introduced. So the species itself is native to East Asia, and to date it's known that the species has established self-sustaining populations in several countries, including Australia, the Philippines, Spain and the United States of America. It's also been recorded in a number of other countries across Europe, in Asia, outside of its natural range, and in South America. And its presence in South Australia was confirmed at the height of the 2011 flood event. And since then, the Natural Resources SA Murray-Darling Basin Wetland and Floodplain Program, through its fish monitoring, has been recording its distribution along the length of the River Murray in South Australia. In terms of the species diet, there's only really a handful of studies or opportunistic observations from around the world, so very little is known about the species diet in Australia, but where there is information available, some of the food items that have been recorded include aquatic invertebrates, worms, fish, plant material, detritus and terrestrial food items. Overseas, it's also been recorded to be eating or consuming tadpoles and frog eggs. And some of the information from overseas records a dietary shift occurring at around 100 to 130 mils, so when the fish reaches maturity, shifting to a largely herbivorous diet. So the Natural Resources SA Murray-Darling Wetland and Floodplain Program undertakes ecological monitoring to inform the adaptive management of wetlands and floodplains across the SA Murray-Darling Basin region. And the sampling is conducted under a Section 115 ministerial exemption in accordance with the Fisheries Management Act and Department of Environment and Water Animal Ethics Committee standards. And so non-native fish species captured as part of that are disposed of as per the permits and ethics requirements. And so we ended up with a few bags of these fish, and we thought, we know from the monitoring where they are, but what else can we learn from them? that we don't already know, and so we ended up dissecting around 130 of the 300 fish that we'd captured at that point in time. And so we grouped the food items that we observed into groups. So detritus, which included things like fish scales or parts of aquatic invertebrates, like water flea, water mite, roundworms and snails, and vegetative matter like a piece of plant. So, of the fish we dissected, a few individuals didn't have anything in their guts, which could indicate that those fish were captured quite early on and they hadn't been feeding in the net, or they digested and expelled anything they did have in their guts. But there were a fair few that did have gut content, which was great for us. And so what we observed was that detritus was the most frequently occurring item, followed by vegetative matter and then aquatic invertebrates. And I guess this isn't really different to what's been found around the world. But we're also quite conscious that we've only dissected a very small number of fish, and so there's probably a whole lot of things that these fish are consuming that we just have no idea about at this point in time. So our observations indicate that the diet is varied, and I guess this flexibility in diet means that food resource availability is unlikely to limit the species range in the SA Murray-Darling Basin. The food items comprised items that may overlap with the diet of native fish, including some species of conservation significance. But I guess we do think and hope that with this added information, we will gain a better understanding of what impact this species has on native fish species or in its invaded habitat, and that this information could be used to inform potential management actions, whatever they may be. And of course, this has left us with many more questions than what we have answers to at this point in time. And we'd like to do some further exploring. So, for example, what proportion of different food groups comprise diet, and is there a difference between what juveniles and adults consume, as has been noted overseas? At some of the sites we also sampled aquatic invertebrates in the water column and the substrate, so we'd like to have a look at or undertake some analysis of that information to see if there's a difference between what's found in their environment and in their guts. And what do they eat that we haven't already identified from the dissected individuals, and what does this mean for native fish and the management of weatherloach in the SAMDB region, or even more broadly the Murray-Darling Basin. And so just a few acknowledgements: the Natural Resource SA Murray-Darling Basin Wetland and Floodplain Program, the SA LAPS, or I think they're Land Care Associations now, and the wetland community groups that are heavily involved in the monitoring program. We do have a paper in prep that we're working on, but for now we've got a report available that looks at the distribution of oriental weatherloach up until 2015.